Larry,
Yes, sir.
let's get you a chair right here.
Okay.
Welcome back to the Conant Show.
Thank you.
Yeah, we got a good signal. Yeah,
You got a good signal.
Pleased to be here. Should I bring my own stool in from the car? Would that be better?
If you'd like to.
Yeah, because that would be better because of the arms on the chair.
Okay.
How about one of these, Larry?
Okay.
Then I'll keep my this is my booster seat here.
Sure. Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So here we are back at the ranch here of Access TV, Woodstock Access TV,
Yes, we are.
and
Pleasure to be back again. Back again for the first time.
this is Larry Ravdin. Ravdin.
Yes.
There he is, Larry. I'm so happy to have you back, and I'd also always like to acknowledge our engineer, the lovely Paula Gloria Barton, who helps make the Conant Show happen. And I also like to thank the facility itself, of course. You know, this is a wonderful venue, and part of our local access original content provider mission is to provide original content of better and higher quality and standards all the time. And so I'm thankful for all of that. Larry had been here probably, I think it was my second, third, or fourth show. I can't remember at this point. And this was very shortly after the venue here had been renovated. And so there were technical problems. We really had almost no audio signal for Larry's mic. And we've been trying to recover that show. But Larry has so graciously come back to us, and we're kind of going to redo the show a little bit. And that was our first time playing, folks, by the way. That was a real joy to
Thank you.
have you jump in like that.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
So, Larry, Paul and I had talked a lot about our show that last time. It was such a delicious show because of the richness and history that you carry.
Yeah.
And the people, places, and things that has touched your life, and by extension, of course, the everything that you've touched in the world with your music.
I've been most fortunate in that I was able to make the most of my living in the music, hotel, entertainment business. And as a matter of fact, last night we did a recreation of a show on WJFF, National Public Radio in Jeffersonville, which is our local NPR outlet. And back in the 90s, there was a program of local musicians. It was called Live from Studio B. And unfortunately, the founder passed away some years ago, but his son came out from San Diego yesterday and organized a group of musicians to recreate the format that was done back in the 90s. And it was wonderful. It was wonderful.
All right.
It was comprised, at that time, back in the 90s, we had a lot of musicians that played in hotel bands. So there was a great variety of personnel to choose from. So and all these shows were great. They were original. Yeah. So it was nice to participate in that again after all these years. As a matter of fact, one of the men that used to appear on the show, he was a wonderful saxophone player by the name of Milt Hessler. and Milt was older than I, but he went back to the 1940s and 1950s, and he played with, some notable jazz bands in the New York City area. And he was the one that introduced me to the cruise line that I had worked for nigh on to 20 years. So because of his recommendation, it opened up another facet of my career.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it gave me a chance to do international travel and visit the societies and cultures that I had read about in my history and geography books. So it was wonderful.
And that's one of the lovely things that we talked about in that first show that we did together is how being a musician is much like having a passport into other cultures, in the sense of you have an international common language of music, and how it didn't. You were saying that you had a kind of a respect that you wouldn't expect, perhaps, maybe.
Yes, especially in a lot of the other cultures. Although I have to say, throughout my career here in the United States, and even now in my semi-retirement, when I play with a guitarist in one of the local restaurants in Sullivan County, in Coneonga Lake, the people that come in, they enjoy the music that we're playing, and they show their gratitude. And sometimes if they bring youngsters in, youngsters, they'll start dancing. They'll start dancing, or the little ones will come over and take a bucket and throw it into the bucket. But it's exposing them to something that they don't see very often. I was fortunate, being raised in Newark, New Jersey in the 1940s, that I had easy access to New York. Every few years, my parents would take my sister and I to Radio City Music Hall to see the Christmas extravaganza. And so I was used to orchestras, and also to when my teenage years in Newark in the 1950s, there were some wonderful jazz clubs in the area. I remember one that was in downtown Newark, and it was run by two organists, Jack McDuff and Jimmy McGriff. They're contemporaries of Groove Holmes and Jimmy Smith and things like that. So
and you had mentioned, was it from your high school or Newark in general, some really some really big talent came out of there through the decades. And
well, Whitney Houston came out of East Orange, and of course Queen Latifah is much younger than I, but she was from East Orange as well. And Four Seasons, Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons, they were all Jersey boys, or guys out of New Jersey. As a matter of fact, a bass player that had been doing club dates with us, we played in bars and lounges, and we did banquets and engagement parties and weddings and things like that. And this was 1962. And he said, gee guys, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to take any more dates with you because I got a call and I'm going out with the Four Seasons. I'm going out with Frankie Valli. His name was Joey Long. So, and his name was mentioned in the film, so I knew everything was true. So it was interesting. It was interesting. And also, too, from my early childhood, I remember it was 1951. I was 11 years old. I had just started playing the year before. And our parents took us to the old Paramount Theater. I don't know the location of it, but it was in Midtown Manhattan. And after the movie, the singer-performer was a man by the name of Billy Eckstein. And Billy Eckstein had a bebop band in 1945. And his singer and pianist at that time was another lady from Newark, New Jersey, Sarah Vaughan.
Oh.
Yeah. And Billy Eckstein was on that show in 1951. And 15 years later, I was playing his performances in the show bands in the various hotels where I played. And Poconos and in the Sullivan County Catskills. So it was wonderful.
Now, I actually got to see Sarah Vaughan up close and personal at the Blue Note Cafe,
Oh,
probably 1984.
really?
And it was such a fluke. I had been living out in Western New York, and at the school I was staying, a young Japanese girl came because her older brother had stayed with us at Grandma Twy's place,
Wow.
and she wanted to go to New York City, and I grew up out east here, just in Rockland County, south of here, and I knew New York quite well. And Tomoko was her name, and I said to Grandma, Grandma, letting Tomoko go to New York City by herself is a really kind of a bad idea. I said, I'll take her, I'll escort her, so when we got to one of the properties that was still in my family in Rockland, we had a place to stay for free,
Yeah.
you know. And so she says, well, let's go to the city and see a show. I said, great, you do it, you get a show, you get it reserved. And she reserved a table at the Blue Note Cafe. I didn't know at all what I was getting into. Wasn't familiar with it.
Yeah.
And they put us, I could touch her dress.
Oh, that's
Sarah
great.
Vaughan's, and I
Wonderful.
had no idea that she was the legend that she was.
Mm-hmm.
And for the next, hour and a half, 2 hours, our socks were knocked off. And I'm just, these touching somebody's an experience like that, is so inspiring, because these are the things that move me to want to aspire to a higher level.
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely. Because
degree.
I remember we used to spend our early summers down on the Jersey Shore. My mother's Uncle Dave owned a property on, it was in North Long Branch, adjacent to Monmouth Beach. And in 1935, a big storm, probably a hurricane like Sandy,
Yeah.
washed up a beach. And Uncle Dave had an Army and Navy store in Red Bank, New Jersey. And Uncle Dave built pavilions, and he built lockers and showers. And he allowed his relatives to use the facilities gratis. And so from my earliest recollections, the first photo taken of me at 3 months old in 1940 was taken on Uncle Davy's beach. And I had, pleasant memories. I have a cousin who's 5 years older than I, and we both agree that it was an essential part of our growing up, of our childhood experience. So we have good memories. We have good
Yeah.
memories of that. Good memories.
My grandmother stayed at a little kind of seasonal hotel in a place called Ocean Grove,
I remember that well. Yeah,
and
it was a religious community.
it was a religious
Yeah.
community. And
Yeah.
one of the really great things about it is that on Sunday they had this rule that no wheel could turn. So any rotary clock or automobile, everything stopped.
Wow. Yes.
I don't know if they still do that, but
I don't know. It's near Asbury Park.
it was right
Deal
next to it.
right
Mhm.
next to Asbury Park. Yeah, and I understand in the church there they have a wonderful church organ, that's
Oh.
been recorded. They've had performances on that. But yeah, I remember that from my childhood as well. Yes.
I think Asbury Park is history now too. I'm not sure.
It's coming back.
Is it? Yeah.
It's coming back. It went through some difficult times, as Newark, New Jersey did, in the 1960s, late 1960s. I was already living, in Liberty at the time when they had their difficulties. And it hasn't fully come back, but they've been making some improvements. They built a performance center, NJ Pack,
Mm.
down in downtown Newark. And they've had some, stellar performances there. So little by little, it's coming back. But it was a great city to be in. When I grew up in the 1940s and the 1950s, I had easy access to this city, And I remember I started going to the jazz clubs in the late 1950s, early 1960s. So the original Birdland was still open, you know, and the Metropole Cafe. And in the 1960s, it used to be a go-go place, you know, the girls twirling around the
Right,
poles.
yeah.
But at night, it was a jazz club. I saw Woody Herman's band there, and Maynard Ferguson, and great old trumpet player Henry Red Allen. And I saw Jack Teagarden there on his last visit to New York, and right from there he went out on the road, and unfortunately he died during that road trip. But a man that I had just met, mind you, I was 21, so a friend of mine from New Jersey took me into the city to the Union floor, which was in where the Roseland Ballroom was. I believe it's on 52nd Street. And anyhow, I met some of these older musicians that were going out with the road bands at the time, with the Billy Mays band and Buddy Morrow, and they all left from this bar, musicians hangout called Charlie's. And anyhow, I met this man. I was in my 20s. He was in his 30s at the time. And when I was in town, he had sat in with Jack Teagarden at the Metropole, and he got the gig.
Yeah.
You know, I was up in a rehearsal studio listening to a rehearsal band. His name was Bobby Jones. I got the gig, man. I got the gig. We were all so happy for him. It was wonderful. Yeah. And my favorite club was the Old Half Note. It was on Spring and Hudson. It was in the lower village, past Houston Street, and it was far below, a few blocks below where the Village Vanguard was. And it was right outside the Holland Tunnel. And I and some of my friends from New Jersey, we were young musicians, and we would go there. And there was a nice waiter, Al the waiter. He was funny. He worked in one of the Jewish delicatessens. I don't know if it was Ratner's or one of the Jewish restaurants. And during the day and at night, he was a waiter, at the Half Note Club, and he used to wear tails. He used to wear tails, and in that time, people could smoke in the club. And if he saw somebody take out a cigarette, he ran across the room and with his lighter, and he lit the cigarette. But I saw so many wonderful people there. It was actually the home of Al Cohn and Zoot Sims, and they had come out of the big bands, namely Woody Herman's band. That was one of the big bands they came out of. And so Cannonball Adderley and his brother Nat, and Coleman Hawkins and Ben Webster, and Lenny Tristano, who was a musician, pianist, and a great teacher. He was there one night with Lee Konitz and Warren Marsh, who were among his students. As a matter of fact, there's a woman living out in Callicoon, and she was a student of Lenny Tristano, and she's still working to this day. She plays jazz piano, and she sings.
Have you ever met a fellow by the name of Vince Giordano?
The name is familiar.
Well, Vince Giordano, for those of you who don't know, I just met the man about 3 or 4 months ago. We had a premiere show opening for his movie. I can't remember the title of the movie, but it documents Vince Giordano's effort as a big band leader in New York for the probably 3 decades or more now.
Yeah.
And he has the largest archive of sheet music for bands, with all the different orchestrations going back to the 1920s and even and beyond.
Yeah.
And he's kept this real kind of old time big band or jazz going. And he came to Woodstock, and I got to chat with him for a while. And it seems that, there's an interest in this great old music, but there's just so few people doing it.
Yeah.
And one of the things that made me think of him is when you were talking in our previous show, you were talking about the Borscht Belt experience here,
Yeah.
and you know, the Catskills really took a hit economically. You know, say from the Great Depression, the crash then, and then it sort of successively over the decades kind of petered out.
The Jewish-owned hotels back in the 1800s, there was the silver period, and then the golden age of the hotels started somewhere in the 1900s. They started probably around in the 1920s when the Grossinger family, they were emigres from Austria, and the Kutcher family, they originally established, they bought up farms or boarding houses, and then gradually, you know, all of these boarding houses, they grew, and people came up here for the fresh air. They came up here for their health. In the Liberty area, in the 1850s, there was a tuberculosis sanatorium it's on Loomis Hill in Liberty. And matter of fact, some of the rooming houses, they had these big open porches. And in the 1930s or 1940s, people would come up, you know, for the fresh air, and they would stay out on the porches for the summer. And I had a wonderful tailor here when I came up. His name was Chris Scipione, and he used to fill me in on all of the information. He came to the U.S. somewhere early 40s, and he said that a lot of the business people that came up to the mountains and established businesses originally came up for health reasons, like if they had a spot, you know, for tuberculosis, or they came up to the mountains for the cure. The fresh air, and the milk and eggs and everything was all for good health. And you had the emigres that were working in the garment district in New York that came up to the Catskills for the summertime. There was other musicians. There was a songwriter, I believe Sammy Fain, whose family owned a small hotel in South Fallsburg. You know, he has, I can't name any of his songs right now, but he was a very famous songwriter. Yeah. And a lot of the performers, they got their start up here, people like Red Buttons and Danny Kaye, who did film and TV. And I remember the first time that I had worked with Milton Berle, we got a TV in 1951 because Uncle Milty was on TV, and every Tuesday night we would go down to the Robertsons and watch TV. And then my parents said, "Why? I guess it's here to stay." So in 1951, we got a TV, and years later, I was, you know, playing his performance. And it was very moving. The same thing with Billy Eckstein. I saw him when I was 11, and 15 years later, when I was 26, I was playing in his backup bands in hotels. Yeah, they were very, very nice people.
Yeah, I'm always kind of plugging for our Hudson Valley and our Catskills here to come back to life in that sense for live music. There's so much inundation with our young people with technology. You know, we have cell phones that are more powerful than computers were 10 years ago. And people have so much access to media and entertainment without ever leaving the couch at home.
Yeah.
But to experience a live band and get out and dance with your friends or strangers is you can't beat that experience.
Sure.
And even in the business I'm in, as a projectionist at the movie theater, that group experience is still a group experience.
Well, I come out here to see the movies. Well, my TV dried out when I was working on the ships. I would leave for months at a time, and the electronics in the set, my father gave it to me in 1982 for my birthday present. It was a Zenith TV, and it was great. But I came back from one assignment, and I turned on the TV, and I got nothing. And it didn't really pay for me to get a cable box, because I'd go out for 4 or 5 months, come home for 2, and then go out again. So I just didn't want to be bothered. And I never got a TV. I've been offered TVs and all that, but I'm happy with the way things are. I know friends of mine are into the media, and they're into the film buying stuff. But for me, I like to get out of the house. Yesterday, as a matter of fact, I had seen a promotion for a film at your theater. It was playing at the Paramount in Middletown. And yesterday I had nothing better to do. I had an afternoon free, so let me go down. And I saw the movie, and it was fine. Sure. I enjoy getting out, and I think technology is wonderful. But I remember years ago, it turned 1990, and I was in one of the local restaurants, and one of the young men there was saying, "Oh man, this is the 90s, man, like everything else is obsolete and old-fashioned." I said, "Well, I lived through the 40s, the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and now it's the 90s. And, I don't see anything very much different. They're resurrecting styles that were, 30, 40 years ago and things like that."
Yeah.
Or one time, you're talking about music and how it affects young people. And I believe a lot of it is conditioning as well. It's what you're conditioned to. And a young woman, she was on her cell phone in the dentist's office, and let's say a ballad singer, let's say someone like Vic Damone. Vic Damone was the first celebrity performer that I ever worked with. Vic Damone was a singer who was recorded a lot in the 1950s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. He was very, very popular, had a lot of hits. And anyhow, I remember playing him for him in 1964, and it was like a dream come true for me. It was just wonderful. But anyhow, as I was saying, this woman was, there was background radio, probably satellite radio. Back when I was growing up, there was a station in New York, WNEW, that used to play a lot, Tony Bennett, Sinatra, and the big band singers.
I remember it well. I used to listen to that.
And William B. Williams, and I remember Art Ford. They were the disc jockeys. Anyhow, the station that I was listening to in a dentist's office reminded me of the WNEW format. And the young woman, she's on the cell phone, and she's saying to her friend, "This music is driving me crazy." It wasn't what she was listening to, what she was used to listening to. And conversely, in my travels, whenever I got to Hong Kong, and always on the world cruise or the Southeast Asian cruises, Hong Kong was always on our list of ports. And I became friendly with one of the band leaders at one of the pubs, Ned Kelly's pub in Hong Kong on Ashley Road. And it was an all Filipino band. They were all former cruise ship musicians. And they played American standard music, little Dixieland and stuff like that. We had a big book, but we improvised almost everything, And the singer was a Filipino woman by, I think her name was Annie. And she did Sarah Vaughan, she did Shirley Bassey and all that, and she sounded, her name was Maria. And she sounded wonderful. Anyhow, one night, toward the end of the evening, a whole group of young Asians came in. And, they sat down at a table in the back. and we were doing our set, and they were getting up and they were dancing. They really seemed to be enjoying it. So I said to Colin, the band leader, I said, you know, this is interesting. This is curious because this is not the music that they're conditioned to. That this is not the music that they would be listening to. Yet for some reason, it reached them. It reached them. So
Yeah.
I thought it was a great thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like the idea. I think they call it the Satchmo School of Music. Is if it sounds good, it is good.
Yeah,
You know.
sure.
And
Yeah, Ellington had a saying too. You know, I forgot it right now. It'll come back to me.
yeah. Maybe I'll tinkle a little bit while we think of something.
Okay.
All right. And
Sure enough.
I remember there was one thing I want you to think about is you told a story last time about how you had kind of traced the footsteps of your ancestors when you Odessa
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
yeah.
They weren't in Odessa, but I was in Odessa, and my grandparents, my mother's parents, left Russia, and they came from the village of Dvinsk, where coincidentally my father was born there in 1907, and that was a few years after my grandparents left, my mother's parents left. And when I did Fiddler on the Roof last summer, I had done excerpts from it throughout the years, but I had never done the whole show in its entirety. And I just realized that the time frame of the show took place in my grandparents' era.
Yeah.
And my grandparents left probably around 1901, 1902, because the pogroms were starting in the late 1800s.
Yeah.
And they had two little boys, one born in 1896, and my Uncle Joe born in 1900. And I think they came over probably around 1902 because my first uncle born in America, Uncle Mo, he was born in 1903. Then my aunt, my mother's sister, was born in 1907. And my mother was last born in 1910. But in doing that show, I had to think that how fortunate I was that they had the nerve, the gumption, to leave and come over here and to enable me to be born here and to have this wonderful life. You know, they made it possible for me. And I got the musical connection from my father. My father was very musical. They said he used to play guitar. We had an old guitar in the hallway. I never heard him play, but he had a very good singing voice. He had good pitch, and he had excellent taste in music as well. And I started asking for music around age 9,
Yeah.
because my 4th grade classroom was right next to the auditorium. And every Wednesday morning, I heard the orchestra start up, and I got, wow, you know,
Yeah.
made the little, what hair I had then stand up. And it kind of put the seed in my mind. That's something I would like to participate in. And it was finally the following year, at age 10, my mother didn't know if we could afford it or not, but my father said, I want him to have the opportunity to do that. And my mother acquiesced because I was shy in school, and she figured, well, it'll bring me out of my shell. So here I am, out of my shell.
That's beautiful. That's a composition from a good friend of mine, Mike Deary, who's now in Colombia.
South America.
Yeah, Mike had to leave the Catskills because his retirement wouldn't cover the base cost of living in his little home out past
Yeah.
Phoenicia, Woodland.
I know, yeah, people are having a problem because we used to have lecturers come on the ship when we were down in Panama. I had been through the canal many, many times, and I hate to call them expats, but I would say these are Americans that relocated to Panama, South America. Very good friend of mine, a drummer by the name of Joe Anello, is living in Costa Rica, and he loves it there. You know, it might not be for everyone.
Yeah, well, $200 will carry him through a month of rent and groceries.
Oh, I know.
It's just, and he
Yeah.
has been going to Colombia probably, I think he said 3 decades. And so he knows the language. The different villages that he stays up in the mountains. He's got it at an elevation. It's actually pretty much lovely, like this time of year, all year around.
Yeah.
He's really found a real paradise there. And I see these little Facebook messages from him from time to time, and he posts a few pictures, and it's really looks like he's having a lot of fun because he's playing music with this really young generation of players. And then he was telling us about this 11-year-old prodigy of the guitar, who's mastered all these really involved jazz pieces, from the 40s and 30s. Yeah. And that really took him by surprise. The last time I saw him.
Well, there's a young man out now by the name of Joey Alexander.
Yeah.
I know he's Asian or part Asian, and he's I don't know, around 12 or 13. And as a matter of fact, one of his recordings just won a Grammy. He's a prodigy and phenomenal. But you know something? I hope it lasts, because oft times, too much too soon. They're not prepared for it. And what happens is that sometimes promoters, they look to take advantage.
Yeah.
And I have a colleague whose daughter went to Crane School up in Potsdam, and Stephanie, they're from Monticello, and anyhow, she played flute in school, and she was also in the drama. She did the shows. Anyhow, she went to Potsdam, and her father said to me, he said, I don't really want her to go into music. I said, Jim, she's a young woman, let her find her own path. My parents were that great with me too, Well, I was living at home. I was working. I was finding my way in my late teens and my early 20s. And at one time, I had stopped playing music for 3 years. And it was a very unhappy period. And one of my dearest friends, we've been friends since 1953, 1954, and we're still close today. And at one time, this was around 1961, and he said, this is the time I really think you should get back into music. I had some minor surgery for varicose veins, which was family heredity, and I had to take off about 6 weeks. So he invited me. He said, come into New York with me, and I'll introduce you to my teacher, who was Joe Allard. May he rest in peace. He was professor of saxophone and clarinet at Juilliard and the New England Conservatory. And he introduced me to Joe, and I started studying all over again in 1961. And in 1964, I was taking a lesson with him. And he said, after the lesson, he says, I have an opportunity I think you might like to look into. And at that time, they had what they call territory bands. These were little dance bands that traveled through the U.S. They had their itinerary. They started in New York, and then they went south, and then we went down into the interior, and then I came back up on the West Coast and then back through the interior and then back to New York. So I was out for like 3 or 4 months. And I took the opportunity back then, and it was my reintroduction to the music business. The reason I'm saying it now is I told my friend, let her find her own way. You know, she's in school, and this is what happened. She won the Met auditions. I forgot what year it is. And she's a mezzo-soprano with, you know, the New York Met.
Wow.
Today. And it's wonderful, you know. And the reason I said, you know, a lot of people, she won the auditions, and people come out of the woodwork, oh, we want to handle you, we want to do this, we'll do this for you. And fortunately, her teacher gave her a mentor who's named Marilyn Horn. Marilyn Horn was another mezzo. Yeah. And Marilyn mentored Stephanie. And Stephanie's probably around, I don't know, 42, 43 now. She's traveling the world, and she's studying to be a Wagnerian, you know, mezzo-soprano. She'll be doing Wagner's work, and she's giving master classes, and, you know, she already has sung with Placido Domingo and Luciano Pavarotti, and she's doing very nicely. And had she not done it her own way, it would have been lost.
It would have been
So I saw her father, you know, about a year ago, and he's very happy and proud. I said, see, Jim, it worked out.
Yeah, it does work out.
Yeah.
You know, you kind of touched on the idea of music and healing for a moment there, and that's one of the things that, you know, when you say how music, you know, say commercial music, the way it's been going, say just in America, from my worldview, which is, you know, kind of limited. You know, I remember how influential specifically the Beatles were for me, and that was a very big leap from kind of the innocent rock and roll, if you could call it that, the kind of the Elvis Presley stuff, or that, you know, very
1950s.
kind of formulaic and kind of predictable, and then somewhere in the 60s there was this explosion of creativity and experimentation, and I was never a big fan of the Beach Boys. But we had a documentary on Brian Wilson, and this is what I love about my job at the movie theater is
I saw it there.
I get to see, you know, these great documentaries, and I didn't know Brian Wilson's story, and he really was the
Creative
brilliant creative force, who, much like a lot of other great creative forces, are not understood by those closest to him, and that was what was so painful to see. Is you know, music was everything to him, but to those that were benefiting from it financially around him, wanted to control that.
Oh, sure.
That aspect of it.
Yeah.
You know, and that's kind of getting away from what my thought was, and my thought was that I had an art teacher in my 1 year of college in Manhattan, and one of the things he said is that, you know, if you're going to be an artist, and I'm going to extend that as to, you know, artist being a musician or a poet or painter or whatever, you know, you have a responsibility to be intelligent. And I believe that. I believe that you know, in our making of music, we create a feeling in the room, and that feeling, as a vibration, will impact people, and there's a responsibility with that.
Absolutely. I can relate to that because a couple of years ago, I was invited to play at a nursing home during the Christmas holidays, and anyhow, playing with a small group quartet, and one of the attendants came up to John Hart, who was responsible for the date, And she said, you know, that man that I was tending to, this is the first time I've seen any reaction from him in all this time, you know. And as a matter of fact, back in July or August, one of our contemporaries is now in a nursing home up in Roscoe, New York. And he was a saxophonist, composer. And anyhow, we weren't all that close, you know, during our careers. He was strictly jazz. I came from the commercial end of it, which I'm not really apologizing for, but that's how I was trained. And very fortunately for me, you know, it enabled me to play various genres of music. You know, I was classically trained, and then I got into swing and big band when I was in high school, and then started working the bars and lounges in Newark, New Jersey, doing rock and roll, and then I started doing show bands up in the mountains in 1964. So all of those techniques and all of those skills, they all came together because of that. You know, at one time I had played a show for Shirley Bassey, and I had done a solo on something. I think it was Hey Jude. And one of the musicians said to me, you know, man, he said, you did this as good or better than the guys down in the city. I said, does that mean I can come back? Yeah. But it's nice to, the way I see myself as a musical actor. I'm an actor, and I have all of these, I don't even call them tricks, but I have all these different modalities that I can choose from. You know, I've had my mentors. As a matter of fact, one of my favorites, may he rest in peace, lived up here. David Fathead Newman lived out in Mount Tremper toward the end of his life. Ray, he was with Ray Charles. Wow. David was the tenor saxophone player on all of Ray's albums. His solos are distinctive, and they're divine. Yeah. I've never heard him play a bad note. As a matter of fact, some years before he died, I went to see him at a local, at the Tustin Theater in Narrowsburg. And I was too embarrassed to go up and, you know, tell him that I was a fan of his. But the nice thing is that out in Frost Valley, there's the White Camp. And anyhow, I had friends from New Jersey from my childhood, from my teenage years. They come up every February and spend the weekend. Anyhow, I was talking to the woman who was a concierge at the front desk, and somehow David's name came up. And she said, oh, you know, I'm very friendly with his wife. I said, well, you tell her the story that you met this man who was a big fan of his, but who was too embarrassed to go up to him at his performance. And unfortunately, he died a couple of years later, and I thought somewhere down in life, you know, I would meet him. But he was he was a very, very big influence on me in that genre. A wonderful man and a wonderful, wonderful player, you know. So, or people ask me what who influenced me the most. So many people did. You know, people, well, you know, in the jazz field, people would say Charlie Parker, but there are others. There are others that came before Charlie Parker. Also, too, there are fabulous section players, lead alto players that came out of the big bands. And one of my favorites, of course, was Benny Carter. He's a wonderful musician and composer and band leader. As a matter of fact, from what I understand, is that at the end of World War II, the armistice was announced. He had a radio show in the 1940s, and it was announced on his show that the war was over. But I've been so fortunate. I have so many influences. So I told the lady at the front desk, you tell Mrs. Newman, you told David's wife, that you met a man who, you know, is deeply indebted to her husband. Yeah. So that made me feel good. Yeah.
Gratitude is a good word there. I mean, I was very fortunate. When I got my interest in music was about the same age as you. I was 9 years old, and my sister's fiance, Mike Baglione, was kinder to me than my own brothers were. Because, you know,
Sometimes happens.
a big
Yeah.
family, you know, and I'm the youngest, I'm kind of the chore, you know. So,
Yeah, sure.
So they'd kind of, you know, kick me around a little bit.
Yeah.
But, you know, Mike was kind to me, and I wasn't allowed to learn the drums because my mom thought they'd be too loud.
Yeah.
So she got me a guitar, and you know, Mike was always hanging around the house courting my sister, and you know, I'd always sneak some time with him to learn a few chords or something, and he really, I have to credit Mike for getting me disciplined, really, and serious about taking the guitars in a serious interest, and it became. I was lucky because in those years, you know, say from when I was 9 till I was maybe 21, there was a thing going on in culturally in our county, down in Rockland County, and everybody was playing music in those days.
Yeah.
Folk music was big. Everybody had guitars, and everybody was sharing their instruments. And you know, there was technology was impacting, you know, electric guitar more and more, and more and more devices that we could add on and effects that we could play with. And the spirit of sharing knowledge, you know, I grew up with my youngest older brother being 7 years my senior, and their friends hanging out at our house, you know, became my friends, and so I naturally gravitated to the musicians in that bunch, in that group.
Sure.
You know, all of them about a decade older than me. And I could handle that because my brothers gave me those skills, those social skills.
Sure.
You know, I was a lot younger, but I still had the social skills of these older cats, and I got invited to play these jam sessions, and they were, you know, rock and roll jam sessions, but again, it was right at that real creative period where things really started blending. You know, rock and roll and jazz.
You were getting into
classical
fusion.
Fusion was really going on, and that sense of sharing seemed to take a back seat somewhere in the 1980s and 90s, seemingly to me. Maybe other people out there could relate to this, but we weren't sharing instruments as much anymore. We didn't help each other as much. I mean, all my local high school rock and roll bands and country bands, you know, George, you got an amp? We need a PA amp, or you know, we'd all help each other.
Yes.
And then this sort of ended, you know, with this idea of, you know, I, me, mine, you know, to quote George Harrison, and I found that I couldn't listen to the radio anymore because I didn't relate to it. You know, the cultural programming had changed.
Yes.
And fortunately, it seems like it's swinging back the other way again because of this YouTube and all this media that we have. That's people are uploading all this historical, you know, footage of you know, whether it's a Janis Joplin or a jazz grade or you know, some classical pieces. But now, you know, it's globalized. It's from all over the world, and my hope and desire is that you know, through a show like this or something that young people and older people connect. And let's play music. Let's get the people out there and dancing and kind of bring our quality of civilization up a notch.
I have a very close friend in Larry Chance of Larry Chance and the Earls, and Larry and I are the same age, and he basically they started their group around 1957, singing in the hallways at the high school. He was born in Philadelphia, and he came to the Bronx in his mid-teens, around age 14, 15, and also too. You know, they started singing in halls and the street corners. And also, there were gangs then as there are gangs today, although I don't think the weapons were as nasty as they are today. And he saw a number of his schoolmates, his colleagues, get into trouble and get killed. And music was the way of keeping away from all of that,
Yeah.
And one of my influences, he didn't know this, but we were classmates from first grade through 12th. His name is Marty Scheller, and anyhow, he was playing drums at age 8, and he started playing trumpet, and he was already in the orchestra. And then I joined the orchestra in school, probably 1951, I would say, after I got through, preliminary scales and stuff like that. And we were close in high school. I forgot, I have a photo from 1955 that I wanted to show you. It was a Valentine's dance, and it was like a 16-piece big band, full saxes, five reeds, 6 brass, and stuff like that. Anyhow, Marty was playing in that band, and we were there. Later on, after he graduated, he became the music director for Mongo Santa Maria.
Beautiful.
Afro-Cuban.
So we did it. We've pretty much killed another
Wow.
hour, and we'll go out playing something.
Okay.
A little suede shoes, maybe.
Yeah.